4C are no stranger to shorts with several collections in the past, with the studio liking to give fresh talent to them to see what they can offer them. There's less danger involved, especially compared to a full production. Even in projects like Eternal Family, which is technically a collection of 30-second ads, you can see the unrestrained energy the animators are given. It's a playhouse, with such a blistering speed of energy filled throughout the whole thing. It's kind of like a 90s MTV feel. It all barely ties together by the end, but it doesn't really matter. You're only given those 30 seconds, so you might as well just go as wild as you can. But they can put a narrative together at all is kind of astonishing. Genius Party is a bit like that if you up to the number to like 15 minutes and the whole scale of everything. The philosophy here is to let the creators make what they wanted. Both big names and small will come together with these 7 shorts. And the intro is a taste of what's here to come. It's like a sketchbook stream of consciousness. We'll see as we go, it is pretty telling. And it's from animator Atsuko Fukushima. It really follows the energy of the music as we see the opening of it all. You know, you've got to follow that beat with the flying, wild logic thrown to the window. There's some pretty interesting effects here with its textures and clouds using CG as the studio always does, but this is a pretty subtle language. It is all about death and rebirth in this ritualistic opening. And as we see from this second shot, we really have no rhyme or reason to what happens. Shoji Kawamori comes in, the creator of Macross himself, into this sort of strange, snotty kid reality, where the kid reenacts something of an earlier age. Bringing drawings to life. It's certainly a way that animators think of themselves. But this time, the young child is able to save the whole world. I wasn't exactly expecting it to go that way. There's kind of a nice use of a visual metaphor towards the end where we see the idea of how influence comes into play from an animation perspective. The boy's early experience with things like tokusatsu basically saving the day. Although it is a little bit wacky, let's say. Certainly the team is having fun with it, and you can even see a couple of the lineages of Macross there with things like the Itano circus. Though I think the heart of it all comes from the child's imagination in the end. Now next we have Kimura up, who is obviously a very talented art director and went in to be his own director as time would come. But this is definitely a strange one from him. It is kind of a mixture between sort of puppet tooling, very striking illustrations, and 3D animation. We see a lot of the texture maps the studio is known for, but within this sort of grimy kids book style. There's definitely some weird walk cycles in here, and it's close to being a creepy YouTube short if I've ever seen one. I'll give it to him for the imaginative world and designs. So I thought this one was a really fascinating sort of mystery take. It takes you for a premise that doesn't really make any sense at first. How this is happening, why this is happening, and what can be done. Kind of mixing that slice of life premise with something a little bit more towards the thriller side of it. Kind of reminds me of the film Enemy. There's some fun chases here, and the suspense of it all keeps you on your edge. Even with the style of animation and characters, the way the eyes look in the 3/4 length gives it a sort of unsightly feeling to the whole thing. Yoji Fukuyama does a really great job here. It's one of the most simple but engaging shorts. Kind of fascinating choice too, because he's mainly known for manga. Alright, I've got to be honest with everyone. This time, this short, that was hard for me to get through. It's this sort of meta-talk, philosophical, indulgent perhaps, but to be honest, Yeah, it does remind me of the sort of work I might have ended up doing in the future, so if I do, please stop me. It involves a lot of rotoscoping and 2D layer effects, and it is very long. I think it might be the longest short, and it keeps the same kind of tone and this sort of dry voice that continues to monologue this sort of process, almost like he's creating his own internal conspiracy theory that's slowly trying to brainwash you. Yeah, I've got to say this one ain't for me. It holds to a very realistic kind of style, but in that way that's limited for what it can do animation-wise. Masaaki Yuasa. He's back again at 4C, and this is maybe his weirdest short ever. It's definitely the closest to something like Mind Game, but it takes it like a step forward. This is effectively his version of Fantastic Planet. It's colourful and strange, and it still mixes those live action bits with the animation that you're known for, but it emphasizes both the emotions of the character and their movements, because that's all you have. There is no dialogue, and it just goes through his fears, his joy, and him kind of becoming an adult by the end of it. It's similar to most of the styles you'd see from Yuasa in this period, but there is a level of sort of grain and soft shadows that give it a real particular feel. The world is so cruel, but also indifferent, and I think that's really what you get from the end of this. You were just kind of dropped into the world and have to accept it by its rules, ones that you aren't privy to. In a way, it's quite beautiful though, especially when it just kind of lets the imagery breathe. It's funny though, because at times it is so intense, but then at others it's just so silly and immature. It finds a sort of poetic position between both of them. And then it ends, out of nowhere, with this possible idea of it will maybe continue one day. But I don't think it ever did. Hey, that's life. And maybe that's something to be said about Genius Party as a whole. It is unvetted ideas thrown at the screen, for better or worse, with such a variety of imagination, without having to really worry about any will this sell? That's not what they're concerned about. It's simply a showcase. Watanabe does come in towards the end. He named this one after a Fishman song, Baby Blue, and it is a sort of peering into the future of his career. It's almost a setup for it, with these sort of smaller drama-related character pieces, opposed to what he's known for at this time, which was action. And while it starts quite quiet, and even with the orchestration being strictly on an acoustic guitar, even if it is Yoko Kanno, you might not actually be able to tell. But it does start to show a couple of his techniques, maybe let's say, when it comes to the intensity of its chases later on, and grenades and gangs that happen before the bittersweetness. It can be kind of rebellious and charming at the same time, with its school day fantasy, dipping out and sort of just forgetting the world for a moment. The what ifs of youth, eh? There's certainly an element there of public transport failing you in some way, taking the wrong path and ultimately having to figure some other way out of it in the end, which leads to a lot of the misadventures of life. Mundanity with dashes of excitement, you could say. It does bring it all together towards the end though, in terms of this collection, showing really the variety of staff we have here. It's a gentle goodbye, with maybe a pinch of bittersweetness. Well, that would be what I would be saying if there wasn't a volume 2. Genius Party Beyond. A little bit smaller this time, we only have 5 directors. They are some legendary talent nonetheless. This one starts with a big bang. And it is a Maeda number. We haven't seen him since Animatrix, and maybe some of the lineage is still there. We see a fantasy land with bright character, with people from all walks of life. And there's a mysterious meteorite, or so we thought. It really feels big and mystic here, emphasizing on that musical element, colourful, the overlay techniques he's known for. It is also very tempo-driven, just like the first short from the prior collection, but it really builds, and the music just is so energetic. Flashy affair, it's so fun to watch, and then suddenly there's a nice little twist right there, bang, they got you. The second short is a bit weird. It's goofball, slapstick. We're talking about Nakasawa here, who's known for a lot of certainly edgy animation, and while it is very comedic, it can be questionable in its tones and ideas a little bit here at times. And there's a feeling of it where they're trying to bring this rough edges to the side of the picture. It's old-timey. It has that sort of grainy effect all over it. The characters have a lot of personality to their faces. It all hits in a very crude manner. Maybe one could say it's a lot more cartoony than you expect from the creator himself. Speaking of cartoons, what about Wanwa? This one's pretty cool. It's from Shinya Ohira. It's a child's picture come to life. It has a handcrafted quality. There's no lines here. It's loose, impressionistic animation, just kind of running off an imagination, but never stops. The set pieces are kind of insane, and it's always moving in such a way that it feels like a fever dream. You can't even keep up with it. From a happiness to sadness to the darkness, it's overwhelming at times, for sure. But definitely shows that he's a #1 talent that you shouldn't mess with. It's funny to see how these styles go from such direct contrast from this sort of really raunchy, adults-only picture to one that feels like it's for toddlers. Now, Tojin here is actually a pretty interesting example because this short on its own has become kind of internet famous. Over 10 million views. I'm not really sure exactly why out of all the shorts this one did. Maybe it's just the one that lasted online long enough. But it is a kind of dark, metallic world, a very slow, cautious approach to animation. Such a limited palette where red is really the only colour that pops out outside of these sort of special creatures. And it's quite bleak in its position. You have this sort of almost like Gestapo-like force coming to take down these individual creatures for whatever reason. And the effects they use here, especially with the small crystal ball, are pretty impressive. Everything in this world is very fully realised. Honestly, this feels like a pilot for something more opposed to just a short for the sake of it. And the people are biting by the seams of it. It takes that sort of day-to-day life and some of the most detailed teeth-brushing animations I've ever seen and turns it into something much larger and suspenseful. Even in sort of like the contrast of animation here with the life form having a cartoony feeling to it and it being the most vibrant thing on screen. Dimension Bomb, one of the last from Koji Morimoto before almost leaving the studio. It has striking imagery, but also plays with a lot of his motifs. If you've been watching his stuff long enough, you'll kind of see it all going through, but it flashes at you at such a intensive position. This is probably his most esoteric short. Starts almost in a kind of silent, orchestral way. The only thing really playing throughout is this sort of monologue. Perhaps it's about friendship, perhaps it's about the end of the world, I really couldn't tell you. But the world is pretty nice to look at. It has this sort of unbelievably warm setting with its grimy, cyberpunk-esque world with that sort of tinge of his own nuances. His characters are all there still. The light hits them in a very particular fashion. It still calls back to Mobius and that sort of desert appearance. And the falling here, the falling and floating characters have never been more intense. It really has such a strong sense of space. But it's always fun to see Morimoto do another short. Hello there, we have a cat over here. And you have just watched a 4-Sember or a 4C month video. Now there's supposed to be a bunch of them. We're supposed to be releasing them every day after all. And at the end of the month we should have a full, expanded, revised version for everyone to see. If you want to keep checking them out, there should be a playlist probably on the screen, I'm guessing. And to thank everyone who has helped support me during this period of time. It's been a little bit hectic to try and get these videos out. I need to thank all my patrons who get exclusive content. I got a lot of stuff earlier, etc., etc. Jay, Steven's mum, Takayuki Suzuki, Alex Moriarty, Paul, Subsofa, I hope I'm saying that right, and Chunks. Among all these other people, I've had to expand. We're in the editing dock right now, but I've had to expand the screen because I knew there was more space I needed to get all the names on there, so I've changed the angle slightly. Yeah, thanks everyone for their support. Check out tomorrow for the next video.